Hello and welcome to Trek Prime, episode 33. And since this is Jeff's week, we're going to be doing another Star Trek movie. And we did the motion picture last time, which was the first Star Trek movie. And unless you count Star Trek with Amir the Turkish Hobo, the remake of The Man Trap they did in Turkey in the 70s, but that's not an official Star Trek movie. You can see it over on YouTube. It's a trip, but go over and see it. It's interesting, inserting a random character into Man Trap. But anyway, we're going to go with another first movie now. And this is the first movie where the TNG cast fly solo on their own movie. Sort of. And when I say sort of, I mean, I have a personal experience and an idea I wanted to share, but I wanted to know if you wanted to start this, because there are several different vantage points we can look at this movie and how it started and how it came to be.
No, you go ahead and start.
Okay, well, since it was your thing, but anyway, no. Okay, so the Next Generation, we kind of knew at the end of season 6, they had Deep Space Nine on. TNG was winding down. So they did it last season, and we started to hear they were going to be doing a movie. And you remember they changed the insignia from this to the kind of Voyager style one. And I don't know if you remember watching the last parts of season 7, they would try to sell a copy of that insignia on the commercials. They were trying to push this new look of Star Trek that was going to be in the movie. So, when TNG went off the air, they went into their reruns, and you started seeing trailers for this new movie coming out. And we also knew that this was going to be a movie that was going to tie the two together. They were going to have Kirk and Picard at some point in the movie. And I wanted to ask you, because people have different ideas, did you find that an exciting proposition or something that wasn't really needed?
Personally, I was like, is it really necessary, to have a minute? I mean, yeah, it was a cool idea, I guess, maybe to see Picard and Kirk together, but it seems sort of like it was being like an advertising tool for the whole movie just to draw an audience. I mean, it's like, people are going to come to see this movie, so why are you trying to sweeten the pot, basically,
Well, the thing with me is that I just remember at that particular time in 1994, 5, whatever.
Yeah.
William Shatner and Kirk were considered kind of a joke. I mean, they weren't taken all that seriously, and there were people, younger people, more in my age group, I would say, or younger, who really wanted to see him kind of go away.
Yeah.
Who really just wanted to see Picard take over. He was the guy at that point.
Yeah.
He really defined Star Trek. Cisco hadn't really gotten in. We hadn't met Janeway yet. So Picard was really the guy. He was really the new Star Trek captain. So we wanted to see him in the theatrical films and so on and so forth. But it was like, let's just get rid of the old generation and get on to the new one. We'd had the TNG on, and we'd had the movies of the old crew, and it was like, it's kind of like we got the new generation out there and the grandparents kind of tagging along behind them. And, this was like, okay, it's time for the grandparents to have their time and have the kids to, move on. Or the parents, if you want to call it that way. TNG was the parents. So, it was kind of like a parent-child thing. But, okay, now...
they had the idea of, we're handing off the baton, but it was like, well,
right.
In Encounter at Farpoint, you had Dr. McCoy.
Right, that was a subtle... They could have done that subtly. Yeah,
that to me was the handing off of the one generation to the next. And then we had Spock show up, and then Sarek, and then, then Scotty. And it's like, well, how many times are we going to hand off this baton here to the next generation,
That would be very rude, but I'm wondering if Shatner didn't go in there and engineer some of that. I mean, that may sound conspiratorial, but I'm wondering if he didn't have a hand in kind of getting himself in there, because, even though there were some others, it was the last appearance, I believe, of Jimmy Doohan in Star Trek. And Walter Koenig.
Yeah.
They were in it as well. I wonder if Shatner wanted a glorious going out in some way. I don't know.
I thought he pretty had that in Star Trek 6. I mean, everybody had this grand send-off, and that was supposed to be their final movie, but for some reason, the writers decided they wanted to pick up the thread after Star Trek 6 and just show us a little bit more what happened to Kirk and introduce him into the story later. And it's like, well, why are we doing that for? I mean, couldn't they have come up with a story that didn't involve anybody from the original cast? I mean,
it was just a weird thing, because with me at the time, I honestly didn't really care. I mean, if Kirk was in it or not in it, what's the difference? Who cares?
Yeah.
There was a lot of debate, mostly people older than me, but, whatever. I just didn't feel it was all that big a deal in the end of the day. So they did it, and it happened. This movie came out, and, I think at this point we should just do a trade-off. Our experiences in the theater seeing it. I don't know if you go to the theaters to see it when it came out.
Yeah, I did. And I have to say, it was pretty quiet through the whole movie, and which was weird because I saw Star Trek 4 in the theater, I saw Star Trek 2 in the theater, and I saw Star Trek. I didn't see Star Trek 5 in the theater, but I saw the 6th movie, and those movies seem to get a rise out of the audience. When because I went on opening night for Star Trek 4. And that was a riot. I mean, the people in there, it was like watching a baseball game with half the people in the audience in there. But
doing the wave or something.
Yeah, it was bizarre.
Woo, Star Trek!
Because I go, all these other movies that I've ever seen that weren't Star Trek, you never saw anything like that in an audience. But you go into that theater that opening night for Star Trek 4, and it was like a bonanza. It was like,
It might have been that theme too. Maybe they were all entranced by all the bells.
It could have been. I don't know, but everybody was right into it. And when we went to go see Star Trek Generations, it was quiet. There wasn't much action, people stirring or anything like that. And it just seemed like there was nobody really that. Even when William Shatner shows up on the screen or anything, it's like it wasn't a surprise because everybody knew from the commercials he was going to be in the movie. So they kind of took the excitement away for, I think, the audience going to see that movie because they all knew who was going to be in it. And so it was very quiet in the theater watching that.
Well, I was thinking about this a little earlier, my own experience. Suffice it to say, Generations, the experience I had, I didn't really notice the mood of the theater. It seemed like it was pretty filled up. I didn't, but there weren't people in Star Trek uniforms, if I recall. There were just people going to see a Star Trek movie. That's just what I. But it was pretty filled up. It wasn't like I was in an empty house. As far as an empty Star Trek movie house, we'll get to that in a few movies ahead. But anyway, that's another story.
Yeah.
But, with this movie, it wasn't an empty house. But, I was a little bit above the age where you would go to a Star Trek movie and people would be, entranced, like you said, with 4. I never got to see that, never had that experience. So it was a little late to the party for that as far as I was concerned. So it was just a movie to me. But my connection to it was this, okay? Well, it's kind of two parts because one part of my connection to the movie came after, and the first part came before. So I'll start the before stuff. I've been seeing a lot of promo for it, and The Next Generation. Yes, TOS fans may get on my case. I remember TOS very well. Is probably my personal favorite Star Trek. And they always say it's the one you grew up with. I don't know. The more I watch it, I put TOS even at a close middle with it. I don't really, but it just, TNG has more to do with the 80s and 90s generation and reflecting its world around it. So, I always thought of TOS as the parent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kind of the parent series, which it is. It's the, if you want to compare it, Star Trek, TOS is Coca-Cola. TNG is kind of Cherry Coke. I wouldn't call it the new Coke because it didn't fail.
Yeah.
It's Cherry Coke, but TOS was the real thing. It was the classic recipe, and everything came from that. I guess you could kind of say that Voyager was vanilla Coke. If you want to look at it that way. And I guess maybe DS9 was new Coke. I don't know, but I'm just soft drink comparisons. But no, Generations was a thing where my Star Trek was going to be on the screen.
Yeah.
People I knew, not seeing people who were on many years before I was born redoing their work. This was the people I knew, and I remembered seeing on TV for the first time when I was 7. Now I was 14 and seeing them on the big screen.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of that adolescent experience. So I guess if we're going to talk about the movie, we have to start out with what the movie begins with. And you know what? Here's a weird thing about the movie theme. I don't even remember the movie theme that much. It's kind of like Star Trek. I don't even remember the tune to it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Star Trek 6 where it just kind of floated past me.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is it me or after Star Trek 6 did the theme music just not stay that interesting anymore?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's like after Star Trek 5, I guess. I mean, they kind of, it's like when they lost Jerry Goldsmith in 6 and Next Generation, Generations, they didn't really have theme songs. It was just,
generic scoring pieces.
Like music just going right into the movie itself. It didn't really have any theme.
I remember it was kind of weird, though. There was an interesting cinematic aspect. I saw this thing floating around, and it looked like a ball or something. I didn't know what it was until I saw a wine bottle floating through space. And, of course, it christened the Enterprise B, which I knew coming into it was going to be an Excelsior-class ship.
Yeah.
Sort of. Until I see it, and I thought, what? I don't know what my first reaction was, but it was an Excelsior-class ship with additions. I guess that's the best way to describe it. They added all this extra stuff that I don't know if per se was really needed. Like, they added these huge impulse engines to the side of the saucer.
Yeah.
These gargantuan impulse engines. I don't know if that was just an improvement on the original Excelsior or what. And all these little things on the saucer, which were okay, and this thing on the nacelles, which looked like, Bussard collectors or whatever. And they added the different back, didn't they? In the Enterprise B. A different back to the Star Drive section.
Yep.
Didn't they do some different stuff to the back?
Yeah.
In front of it, they put this little thing, like a little handle thing on it, which we discussed, that you felt there was a distinct reason why they put that in as a contrivance to the movie, if I recall.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they wanted to have, well, what they was doing is they wanted to put some parts on the original Excelsior model that they could destroy during the, in the movie without actually destroying the model itself, which is bizarre. I mean, they went to the trouble of adding these outriggers on the side of the secondary hull, and only one part of that was going to get damaged, but they wanted to be able to take one side of that and kind of make an explosion, where the Nexus brushes up against the Enterprise B as it's trying to pull away, and that section of the additional piece of the model was going to get damaged, but it was supposed to keep the actual model under it, the Excelsior model under it, from getting damaged. So they added pieces on it just for that. But like you said, they did more than just that. They added onto the saucer. They changed the look of the nacelles. They basically went from top to bottom. It's kind of like they took cues from the Enterprise D and they tried to manufacture it on the Excelsior class to try to kind of mirror it a little bit, in the design of it. And I thought it was a bit cheesy looking, when I saw it, because it had my eye was drawn right to those friggin' things on the side. It looked like a clam or a claw from
it looked like a claw hog on the side of it.
It did not look like they belonged there at all. I mean, it was like the most bizarre addition. Yeah.
I should add that, this might actually be the only podcast we do that will not be put online till Tuesday, which we'll find out about in a minute, because we get Alan Ruck from Twister. Actually, I see him a bit later in movies, in the role of the captain of the Enterprise B. And what freaked me out were two things about the Enterprise B scene. First of all, and maybe this is just, it's hard for me to believe in Star Trek, Kirk enters the Enterprise B, and he's hounded by what appear to be futuristic paparazzi with old video game machines.
Yeah.
And I thought, looking at the future and the way Star Trek is set up, and what economy the paparazzi are adjunct of, why would they exist in the future? Why would a media like that act like that exist in the future if there was a new economy and they weren't? Because, a lot of that's connected to economy. They're trying to get stories. They're trying to get money. Why would the press clamor around Kirk in that time with a new understanding? That just seemed like a nod to that time, the paparazzi entertainment culture. I just never quite felt it belonged in the Star Trek world, but at that time, it just felt a little weird.
Yeah.
But, I guess I dismissed that thought, but I thought that seemed kind of corny to me. Like, they're trying to get these, celebrities as entertainment kind of thing, into people's, understandings.
and really, and the other thing is that even though they're kind of making a nod to 20th century insanity when it comes to paparazzi, in the future, I mean, wouldn't it be more sound that they wouldn't actually have to have people on the ground with cameras, photographing?
And they look like old Tiger video game machines.
Yeah, it just looked like they take their cell phone out or something and they're just doing it. It's like, wouldn't they have like monitors on the bridge or something that just videotape it as it's coming streamed live or something?
It seemed corny to me at the time. I don't know.
It just didn't belong.
I got past it. I wasn't hung up on it the whole movie, but it was just like, nah.
I guess it was some kind of literary tool or something, to try to find some way to annoy Captain Kirk, that they had the cameras shoved in his face.
Right. And, on the motion picture, when they entered that ship, I mean, they could have had people there doing that.
Yeah, really.
Like walking up to Decker and saying, "How do you feel about Kirk taking your command away?" Like, it just happened. So is Spock going to come back? I mean, you didn't have that on that.
Yeah.
You didn't have the future Sylvia Chase on the ship trying to do an expose on Decker.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm just saying I found it weird that they suddenly did it with this movie, but it was very media centric at that time. A lot of hard copy type shows and O.J. Simpson.
Yeah.
So I mentioned that 3 times. It seemed like you couldn't get enough of them at that time. Everybody was repeating O.J. Simpson. So it was that whole era of let's put it out in the press and do it too much. So that but so they get on the ship and this Alan Ruck guy. Okay. He's the captain of the Enterprise. Now, every ship named Enterprise is historic. And this guy acted like he just got out of command school yesterday.
And he looked like he was like way too young for one thing.
He was beyond green.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, this is all set up to give Kirk a hero thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happens is they end up going on their shakedown cruise, but encountering this ribbon. I guess they refer to it as the Nexus ribbon, or this doorway to this other reality that we'll see later in the movie. But just the oddity of it, he's sitting there trying to figure out what to do, and one of his crew members is the daughter of another famous Star Trek alum, Demora Sulu, which was Hikaru's daughter.
Yep.
And, of course, that also seems set up to give, Kirk a reason to feel old. That's kind of a movie trope with Kirk, isn't it? Kirk feeling old. He felt old in Star Trek 2, felt young by
It seemed to get carried on and on and on.
Star Trek 2, he's starting to think, well, I'm a bigot, so I'm old because I don't like Klingons. And now in Star Trek 6 and Generations, he's like, I'm old because an Enterprise, and these press people make that point. This is the first Enterprise in how many years did they say without James T. Kirk in command, like really rubbing the salt in the wound?
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah. And you can see he's like, yeah, the ship was my life. I should be in command of the ship is this Enterprise, and I'm Kirk. He seemed to have this attitude. So when basically there's this ship that's caught in this Nexus, and this Captain Harriman is blundering, and every time they need something, he's like, oh, it's not installed till Tuesday. It's like that's the day that Starfleet installs everything on their ships in this movie.
Yeah. And also, kind of always, isn't that always the story? Like the Enterprise is always the only ship in the quadrant.
Yeah, it's like they always make it the hero ship.
Why is it
anything?
Yeah, I mean, why is it they never have a reserve ship somewhere standing by in case of a problem? No, it's always the ship that's still being built.
And this ship isn't even ready yet. Nothing's going to be on there until Tuesday.
Yeah. I mean, they did that in Star Trek: The Motion Picture. The ship wasn't even finished yet. We got to send it out. It's like, well, come on. How many times are we going to use that friggin'
Star Trek 5 too?
Yeah, Star Trek 5.
And they even referenced it. They said, we have other ships, but no commanders. They could have just gotten Kirk to command another ship for that mission.
Yeah.
But no, they send him out on this wacky old ship that doesn't work, so...
Yeah, it's like, well, you trying to sabotage this thing or what? I mean, come on.
Like, you want to reserve the flagships for the really big stuff, even if they're not ready yet. Like, the Enterprise is woo-hoo.
Yeah, they leave space dock with half a hull. They still got the frame and people clinging to it with their welding rods and everything.
The Enterprise, we got to have this unfinished ship with people in space who's clinging to the side of it.
Yeah. I mean, they're still installing the windows and their ship's still...
It doesn't finish till Tuesday, but hang on for dear life. We're going to warp zero,
I mean,
So anyway...
By generation, that was getting to be a tired old...
No, by generation, like, this is getting to be an old trope. You're right. Just the Enterprise is the only ship available, even though it's not ready till Tuesday.
Yeah.
I mean, it's getting reverential. They're making jokes about it, like, But then, and the one thing I found interesting and almost comical was that he's sitting there bumbling, and the whole time Kirk's sitting there like,
Yeah, he's
And he jumped out of his seat.
Yeah,
he's
like
like,
he's watching
I'm holding my breath. I'm holding my breath now while this guy blunders because he. So then, what does Alan Ruck do? He turns to him and says graciously, "Captain, I'd be very happy to have any help you can provide." Kirk launches up.
Yeah,
It goes right into full command. Doesn't even like it almost pushes him out of the way practically.
Yeah.
And he's like, "I'm going to take over." So then all of a sudden we start getting the generations. It turns out this ship has Elorian refugees who are Elorians. Then they start coming on the ship, and one of them is Guinan. Okay, so we know who Guinan's species are. We heard little hints that she was an alien in TNG, but she wouldn't talk about where she was from. Now we knew all of a sudden.
Yeah, and then we
realized they knew about her race.
We knew in the series that Guinan was already on Earth way in the past, and somehow she left Earth and went way the hell else somewhere.
And Guinan's history is very strange.
She's here and she's not here.
Or something.
Yeah, she's all over the friggin' place.
Well, this movie sort of actually later on begins to explain how that could possibly be. But anyway, we'll get into that in a minute. There's this issue again where Kirk has to do something to save. I don't even remember what it is now. He has to do something to save the ship, and he doesn't have to do it. The hammer was going to do it, but
you had to modify the deflector array.
Right, that was it. Modify the deflector array.
Yeah.
As you can see, there's little subtleties. I didn't watch this movie today or anything on Blu-ray, so I'm just remembering subtleties from it. And Harriman wanted to do it, but Kirk was like, "Well, I'm the guy. I'm going to go down and do it." So he does it.
Yeah.
And of course, where is it? It's in that little weird shell-lit thing.
Yeah.
And of course, it blows up because this ribbon is hitting it with energy fields, and Kirk is presumed dead.
Yeah.
So basically, the only reason that thing was there was a Galaxy Quest thing. Like, it was just there as a way for Kirk to get killed.
Yeah.
That lip didn't really need to be there.
Yeah.
But they knew if they didn't, and as you pointed out, they had to kind of ruin the Excelsior model to put that on there.
Yeah, that's why they added that piece on it, was so that would be the part that would get damaged and not the actual model itself underneath. So. But
when they used the Excelsior later, they still had that Enterprise B stuff on it.
Yeah, I know, which is weird that they just fixed it and they used it in DS9 near,
I don't know why they didn't just restore it to the Excelsior. I don't know if the pieces came off or what.
I don't know if the person that ended up buying that at the that big auction they had there a while back, I don't know if he got that model as it looked on Generations or if they met, I don't know.
But anyway, so that ends our little 23rd century saga. That's the end of the 23rd century. That's the latest we've ever that's the latest we've ever really seen, the 23rd century, so that's done.
Yeah.
Then we end up, and I found the scene confusing at first until I saw who was on the ship. They show this 18th century sailing ship, and I'm saying, wait a minute, where are we? And then I see Picard on it, so I'm like, okay, we're on the holodeck.
Yeah.
Why? Apparently, there's this odd tradition that, I guess, in that time, that they give crew members promotions in holodeck simulations of 18th century sailing ships. Because they're giving Worf a promotion to lieutenant commander by making him walk a plank. So, which I found strange. And he's everybody got promoted. They put him on an old sailing ship on the holodeck and just made him walk planks. It just seemed kind of a funny way to introduce the next generation thing. So, of course, that sets up another plot. Worf does walk the plank. I think Riker said to retract it to remove it when he went to retract it. I don't know if he did that on purpose or what.
I don't know. Maybe it was just a big joke, I think.
Worf falls in the water.
Yeah.
Apparently, Klingons are like cats. They hate water because he's all grumbly.
Yeah.
And everybody's kind of laughing it off, and Data doesn't get the joke because he's just falling in the water. And Crusher explains to him to get in the spirit of things. So Data pushes her in the water, and nobody's laughing. He doesn't get why. We'll get into that later.
But I thought it was funny because, I was kind of giggling that he did that. And, and there was a few other people in the audience that were laughing. So they said, that wasn't funny.
I thought he was the crew members thought he was being mean to Crusher.
I don't know. I thought it was a funny scene, I
just think the whole vibe of it was that they thought it was funnier that Riker said retract the plank.
Yeah, I don't know.
The plank, where Data just pushed her in the water and there was no climax to it. So, But anyway, so the movie starts off in a humorous note. Then it gets interesting after that because Picard finds out something on the intercom that upsets him and he obviously walks away. Now, this is an interesting movie uniform-wise because they released action figures on Playmates. They had the totally wrong uniform. We discussed that last week. But in this movie, there's multiple uniforms.
Yeah.
In the beginning, they're still kind of wearing T and G outfits with the new insignia. But then in the middle of the movie, they start transitioning to the DS9/Voyager outfits.
That's right.
So it's kind of a transitional point there. And the Enterprise D in this movie has some subtle differences. Like the bridge is different, for example. What were the most prominent things you noticed about the Enterprise D revised bridge in this movie that was different? I see where the consoles were raised a little bit higher.
Well, what they did is they added another floor on the bridge where they raised the captain's chair up higher.
Yeah, that's why they had it higher, because they had that big thing in the middle.
Apparently, what they, I guess what happened was before they started filming, they was worried that the bridge itself would not look well enough on the big screen, so they had to elaborate more on it, more detail, more to make it look more something, like, make it look a little bit more like TOS-y in a way, and so they wanted the bridge to be a little bit wider, spread out. That's why they added the extra control stations on either side of the bridge, and they also darkened the set some too, so it looks a little bit.
I was going to mention that. Now, it's not Nicholas Meyer Star Trek 2 dark by any means.
No.
But they gave it almost like the ship was on permanent sunset mode during most of the movie.
Yeah.
As we used to the TNG not having super bright colors, but kind of having this comfortable, muted look,
Subdued, it was
kind of comfortable. Not dark and not like.
I mean, they didn't actually go in there and repaint the walls like they did in Star Trek 2 and all that. They left everything as it is.
But they just gave it a very duskier look.
They just dimmed the lights more.
His
and
corridors are the same ones from TNG, his quarters. Yeah. But that also goes with the mood of the movie. And, so we're starting out with kind of Kirk dying. And I'm like, okay, so Kirk's dead. And the next day they're all having a laugh. Something happens. And there's an observatory that has sent out a distress call. And they're headed to it or whatever. But or they stop sending data, if I remember, or something like that. And what happens is, I haven't seen this movie in a while. It was weird. I always love this movie. But anyway, so Picard is still sitting on the bridge in his 18th century naval outfit, which I found interesting. At first, I had this little idea: is that going to be the new uniform they're going to be wearing? Because I saw that with the old TOS.
It's funny you say that, because I remember a bunch of people saying, "Why are they wearing these uniforms?" I said, "They're not uniforms." I said, "They're probably on the holodeck." And it's like a light went off, and everybody said like they forgot all the.
Well, I know, but Picard walks out with the uniform, so obviously it's a real uniform.
Yeah, but when they saw the magazine pictures of the movie and they saw Picard and Riker standing on the bridge wearing these old naval outfits, and everybody was like crossing our eyes. I knew instinctively what it was, because you've seen them on the holodecks for 7 years. They're doing all these episodes, and they, and I'm like, you guys don't get it. They've been on the holodeck. That's why they're wearing these costumes.
I saw the movie like that, I had this little joke in my head that is this an extension of those uniforms with the pins on them? They're gonna put these naval-looking 18th century outfits, all these pins that could come off, but it was a holodeck thing when they got dressed up. They got dressed up for Sherlock Holmes and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, basically we go into Picard's, I believe, his quarters, which is, again, everything is very dusky, like the sun is just coming out in this movie in the Enterprise D. And Troy comes in because she senses something's going on, and because she's only part beta, so she can only sense emotions, but she can't sense what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, if she sensed what's going on, the movie that part would have been about 5 minutes long. But anyway, then all of a sudden Picard does something I just didn't expect. He sits there and weeps right on the screen. That shocked me, because I never thought of Picard as a crier. I only saw that happen once, and that was when he was fighting with his brother after the Borg. I never thought of Picard as a guy who burst into tears over much of anything. And ironically, it was with the same character, because he finds out that his brother and cousin were killed in a fire.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, oh boy, they're really going to throw death at us in this movie. It's like, but it got into this thing that was interesting, because he was talking about the fact that he didn't, feel it was necessary when he had a cousin to carry on the family line. Actually, nephew, I should say, to carry on the family line. And now he felt like the Picard dynasty was going to be gone. There'd be no more Picards. So he was dealing with kind of the loss of his family line almost in this movie. And after the whole incident with, Crusher, out of the blue, after all these years on Star Trek, Data decides that he needs to utilize that emotion chip, which apparently Geordi fixed all up for him after the events of Descent.
Yeah.
It's just been sitting there in his quarters suspended all this time. Here's the weird thing with me. I always thought it would have been interesting if they'd done that in All Good Things and had that be a part of the plot. Have Data begin to have his emotions. But they decided to do it in the movie, just to kind of give Data a new subtext.
Yeah.
So we'd already established that, Troy didn't think if Data reached his goal of becoming human, he'd be a bad one. So they put the chip in. And what's the first thing Data wants to experience more than anything? Humor. As a matter of fact, he goes into 10 forward, Guinan gives him some drink, and he spits it out, and he is delighted that he can't stand it. He's like, I hate this!
Yeah.
It's revolting! Can I have more?
Yeah.
So, it gives Brent Spiner an opportunity to be more zany and comical, even more than he was with Data, by expressing that Data is just a humor junkie.
Yeah.
Can't get enough of this stuff. That's one thing he wants to experience more than anything is laughter and humor. Except something goes wrong, and he malfunctions when they're in the middle of a mission. They're on the Amagosa Observatory. They're trying to figure out what's going on. And they meet up with Malcolm McDowell, who we don't really know anything about yet. And he takes Geordi prisoner, and Data gets scared. They beam him back up, and they I forget. They take Malcolm McDowell's character, Dr. Soren, onto the Enterprise beforehand because he kind of reveals Picard's calamity. That whole thing about time is a fire in which we burn, because he kind of apparently knows what happened. And he's also an Elorian. So he takes Geordi captive, and this whole situation is revealed. He's working with the Duras sisters to get something called trilithium that can shut down a star, that can destroy all nuclear fusion within a star, because he wants to use it to bring this ribbon we saw at the beginning of the movie back to him. And Guinan describes it as a doorway to another dimension that exists outside of linear time, where basically it's like another version of the Shoreleaf planet, where anything you wanted or think becomes reality. And apparently it's like a narcotic, like the Telosian planet. And Guinan was part of this. And I always wondered if the reason why Guinan's travels were so disjointed was because she was somehow utilizing the Nexus through a certain point in time to get where and when she wanted to go. Because it was said in this movie you could leave there and end up at any time you wanted. You wondered if she and her fellow...
From what I understand about the Nexus, it had sort of an orbit that it followed in the galaxy. And yeah, so it came around like every so many, I don't know, hundreds of years or something like that. And... so I don't know if there is any connection between using that or traveling or something. I don't know.
I don't know, because like I said, Guinan is one of these people who's very cryptic. She doesn't always answer your questions very directly.
No.
That's one of her characteristics. Even when she's trying to explain to Picard what's happened, you still left with this mystery. So, basically, Guinan is every future plot line ever. Because, you don't get a lot of instant reveals from her. She kind of, you kind of have to work with her a little bit because she's a mysterious character. Kind of like Doctor Who, I guess.
Yeah.
She talks a lot, but doesn't really say that much.
Yeah.
There are certain limits to where she'll go. And there's no different with that. So Picard has to kind of, as usual, glean from, what she means. And she's saying that Soren had more problems with dealing with the Nexus, and he's basically like an addict. He requires that world. Because we know what happened to the Elorians. The Borg destroyed their homeworld. I'm going to guess sometime in the 23rd century. And I wanted to mention the Borg angle because the Federation described in the beginning, back in the 23rd century, Elorian refugees. So the Federation knew about the Elorians.
Yeah.
Was it a distant understanding, or who did they think the Elorians were refugees from?
Well, if they knew, then why was it that in Next Generation, Wesley was like, everybody's trying to figure out, where she's from and all. It's like, well, they knew they were refugees from somewhere. They had to be from some world that they would be labeled as a refugee from, so I can't understand why in Next Generation, Wesley was kind of saying, well, there's this rumor going around that you're from this world and stuff, and, it was kind of making a joke
unless Guinan didn't go around getting an ID made of herself and use some sort of fake name.
I don't know.
I mean, for all I know, he might genuinely have not known, because in that movie, It was kind of like, did the Federation know about the Borg in the 23rd century? You know, because they described them as refugees. What do they think they were being refugees from?
Yeah. So they would have had to know something about that.
And, you know, if they were close enough to the Federation where they could be sending ships out,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know where the Elorian system is.
Yeah.
I mean, the Starfleet knew who they were. I mean, that's a story that's almost stolen to a movie right there in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
You know, how did this Elorian thing, how do they have this awareness of it? Do they know about the Borg? Were there changes? What happened? You know?
Yeah.
But anyway, so they basically go about pursuing this this Sauron guy who's working with the Duras sisters. You know, who, you know, basically just are in it for profit at that point. But what's happened is that Data feels he's betrayed Geordi, and he's kind of having difficulty with his newfound emotions. And that's one central plot point that goes throughout the movie, which leads to a scene where Data and him have a conversation about, and Picard have a conversation about emotion in their full Generations regalia in stellar cartography, which is a normal room in the TNG era, but in this movie, it was epic.
Yeah, it was the largest set ever built at the time on Paramount Studio lots.
I wanted to ask you a question. Was that part of a refit we didn't see, or was that always there? They just didn't show it in the show.
I'm guessing it was a refit that came like with everything else, like the bridge and, you know, all the rest of the ship that looked kind of updated. Yeah, they must. So they've at some point between All Good Things and Generations, they pulled in for a refit, and that's, you know. So I don't know how much time actually passed between All Good Things and Generations, but there had to be a bit, you know.
I always assumed 5 or 6 months.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it could have been a year after that, for all we know. So I don't know. You know, they replaced the bridge module with a newer version of it, and they did.
They might have been going to get all that stuff done in the end of All Good Things. I don't know.
I don't know. There's nothing really said detail-wise about it.
I always just kind of figured that it went off the air 6 months before Generations, so they just, you know, I always kind of figured they filled in that time somehow. You know, I never, you know, I just always looked at that as part of the timeline. So anyway, what happened is that, so yeah, they basically, and there's one thing I wanted to ask you because a friend of mine mentioned this. They said they saw it in the theatrical edition. They cut it out of the VHS in later editions. Soren is interrogating Geordi to find out information about trilithium when he knows about the substance, and he won't tell him. And when he comes back onto the bridge, Lursa and Bator ask him if he's got any information, and he said, his heart wasn't in it. A friend of mine distinctly remembered that in the theatrical cut, Soren actually stops Geordi's heart.
Yeah.
I wonder why they didn't include that in the other editions of the movie.
They probably thought it was too graphic. Might have pushed up the rating a little bit higher than they wanted it to go.
Do you remember seeing that in the film when it was on the screen?
I mean, it was in the novelization. That scene was spelled out in the book, but they didn't put it on the big screen. I think because they just wanted to keep the rating down. They didn't want it to make it too gory, what they was doing to Geordi.
Well, what I'm asking you is that do you remember seeing it in the big screen?
No.
A friend of mine distinctly remembered seeing it on the big screen, but I didn't either.
No, I didn't see it.
Maybe it was just reading the novel and you just free associate. But one scene that was filmed for it, but it was in a lot of the literature about it, and it was in the books, was another scene I should have gone in the beginning, which would have actually been before the theme, which was Kirk skydiving.
Yeah.
Skydiving, which we'd see later in Voyager, of course. And
actually, that was the same outfit that B'Elanna was wearing, was the one that was supposed to be made.
Yeah, I was wondering what it looked like when Kirk was wearing.
Yeah, it was the same one. They just altered it to fit her, but it was the same outfit.
Anyway, so Kirk was doing orbital skydiving, and it's basically just him having doubts about going to the Enterprise B christening.
Yeah.
But it didn't really need to be there, so they cut it, but it was in all the literature.
Yeah.
And didn't they actually have a figure of that?
Yeah, they did.
A skydiving Kirk. I never got it. I don't think I ever got that, but I didn't know it was not going to be in the movie.
Yeah.
They're making a big deal about the skydiving scene at the beginning. Maybe they felt that putting it in would have made it Star Trek 5-ish, like we got to have a Kirk ego trip here.
Well, it would have made the scene funnier if, because the way they wanted to do it was they have him skydiving, and then when he gets to the ground, he has a conversation with Scotty and Chekhov, who are waiting for him down there, and they said, well, are you coming to the christening of the bee? And he's like, no, nothing in this world can get me on that bridge. And then the next scene is him with the doors opening and he steps out on the bridge. And that was supposed to be a cue for a funny moment, like nothing in the world, but yet he went anyway. It's
that whole thing with the wine bottle was just replacement for that skydiving scene.
Yeah.
We can actually start the credits maybe over the skydiving scene and then have him say nothing's getting me on that bridge, and then have the door open with all the press coming out.
Yeah.
Like something got him in there somehow.
Yeah. It was supposed to be a funny scene when he comes out on the bridge, like that. But
so what they did is they replaced it with that wine bottle thing instead.
Yeah.
So that whole scene where he comes on the bridge is supposed to be less annoying and more of a gag.
Yeah.
They cut that out, So, okay, I get that now.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what it would look like, where's the truth? But anyway, so okay. We get to the situation where they end up on this planet called
Viridian 3.
Viridian 3.
Yeah.
They always had planets that had names sounded like that, like a T.
Yeah.
The TNG episodes always had planets that sounded like the name of some kind of tea you could drink, like Viridian or something. Viridian was a very common name. I think they had a species called the Viridians too. That was just, they always used the Idian sounding name in TNG for things.
Yeah.
So they had this Viridian 3, and it's kind of a desert planet. So the Soren is trying to use this weapon to alter the trajectory of the Viridian star to bring the Nexus off course and come to him, because he's addicted to this thing. So Picard is trying to convince him with the skills he knows best, diplomacy, where it's made clear in this movie that he is an absolutely horrible person in physical combat. I mean, he absolutely cannot do anything physically to stop Soren. He's totally inept physically, which is weird because in the Next Generation he seemed to be in pretty prime shape for that, but in this movie he was terrible. So,
yeah.
The ribbon comes to him, the planet's destroyed, but what happens is, interestingly enough, the Enterprise, while in orbit, has to fend off Lursa and Bator's ship, who damage the primary hull. They blow up the ship, but the warp core breach occurs. The Geordi cannot stop, so they have to detach the saucer. The starter section blows up, and the saucer lands on Viridian 3. And a lot of people, weirdly enough, people blame Troy for this. They say that they put her at the helm, and all of a sudden she crashes the ship. But I know that was just a thing that just happened, like a knee-jerk thing. I don't think it was intentional.
Well, here's the thing about that. I don't think even Sulu could have piloted that saucer away from the star drive section fast enough to avoid the shockwave from that explosion. I mean, how many times have they said in all the episodes of Star Trek, just how powerful an explosion from a warp core could be? They were lucky the saucer itself wasn't disintegrated, even at the distance it was from that thing. So, I mean, the ship, the saucer was pretty tough to take that blast. But then it was knocked out of orbit, basically, and it knocked off the engine capability of the saucer.
So, like I said, the saucer crash is a big epic crash. Everything's thrown around, and you see how freaking big the ship is.
Yeah.
I mean,
it just
like
plows right into
in a big forest.
Yeah.
So you see how big and epic this saucer is, and Riker's sitting there while everything's flowing all over the place. So, anyways, basically they're blowing up the set basically while they're doing it.
Charcoal and blocks and wires and everything.
Luckily at this point it's not the heavy wires they had
no, they didn't know, because
but the rocks are everywhere. They got the rocks.
The little glass window on the ceiling got broke, so there was like a bird looking down at him.
A bird up there. But like I said, I'm glad they didn't have all the wires sticking out or whatever. I mean, I'm sure I can put this in because it is TNG. I'm sure the detector circuit flew out, or all of them did, or whatever.
Yeah.
All that stuff. So,
I mean, Worf took a fly right over that tactical station. Craig, I mean, he just, he was just thrown right from which kind of goes back to the safety issue on the bridge. It's like, if it's so easy to throw somebody, over that friggin' panel, I mean, why wasn't there any chairs or anything like that, in the station?
Yeah, even Nimoy joked about why would the Enterprise have more seatbelts or restraints on?
Yeah, I mean, you got half the stations on the bridge where just you stand next to them. Well, that's not very safe. I mean, if the ship's getting thrown around and stuff, I mean, people are going to be thrown through the air.
Of course, it's all just a dramatic thing in the end of the day. They want to make things so they can boom, boom, crash.
And you see that whole helm station just kind of roll towards the view screen, which I thought was funny that the whole thing would just roll right up to the screen.
It's funny because now looking back at it, a lot of people feel the Galaxy class ship was probably a mistake in the sense that it didn't really fit in with the realistic nature of the galaxy at that time. and threats they had. But that's kind of another story. I just wanted to throw that out here. And I wonder if that destroying of the Enterprise D in this, which I totally did not expect.
Yeah.
Because that was a kind of a sad aspect to me. Like, they're destroying my Enterprise. This is like Star Trek 3 all over again. Except we debated ourselves with that. Was that actually the original TOS Enterprise they destroyed?
Yeah.
Or they destroyed in the refit? We've been through that. But this was the Enterprise D. And the reason I know it was the Enterprise D is, and we've discussed this too in our after shows in the past, because of all the stock footage of it from TV they actually use in this movie.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because when you stretch it out for the demands of the big screen, it looks obviously like reused footage.
Yeah.
We watch it on the small screen, it looks like it's TOS, TNG footage. But on the big screen, stretching all that out to those proportions, it's very obviously TV footage.
Yeah.
And, you told me, you said a lot of people didn't think the Enterprise D photographed well. But if you ask me, for the scenes they did use the Enterprise D for in the movie where they took new shots of it, it looked great.
Yeah. I read somewhere that they actually repainted the model from that duck egg blue color to gunmetal gray. And they put reflective paneling for detailing on the hull and some of the scenes where they had to film with the actual model for that movie. And I was like, well, you don't really notice the difference in the texture or the color on, the scenes where they showed the Enterprise, in the original, not the footage that they took off the floor, but, the actual stuff they refilmed just for the movie. It didn't look like it changed, the color any, but I guess from TV to the big screen, they had to change the color of the model a little bit so that it looked better, because I guess there's something about television color. You have to paint the models.
They must have done the first part last or something, because when it landed on the planet, it was the same duck egg blue it had always been.
That's right.
They must have shot that first and then repainted it for the space scenes.
That's right. Yeah.
Because it landed looking the same. So I don't know. I'm assuming the ship maintained its color in the universe.
Yeah.
If it landed that color, but they painted it differently. But that's like that old joke that I've told you about. What do they say? Cows don't look like cows on film. You got to tie 60 cats together. All these weird contrivances directors do when they goof. It's like whatever. But if they painted it, they painted it. I didn't really hear anything about that, but that's interesting that they did that for the space scenes, because it looked the same color to me, like you said.
Yeah, it did. It didn't look like.
I didn't notice any deep change to it if they did do anything. But so they destroy the Enterprise, and then and I'd seen it in the preview. There was this whole thing with Soren reaching his hand out and the Nexus coming down, all very heraldic.
Which was weird. He launches that primitive rocket towards the sun, and normally it would take a while for that to reach the sun, and when it blows up, it's like, well, we wouldn't have seen the explosion of that, right off. It would have taken minutes, for somebody on that planet to actually see the sun go dim. They would have still been getting light from the sun.
That's been brought up about movies that are outside of Prime, if you know what I mean. So we'll be discussing those here, but the proportion of things. But like I said, this is Star Trek. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, but everybody that was, I think a lot of people in the theater kind of giggle a little bit at that, because they said, "Oh, you wouldn't have even seen that happen. The sun, you wouldn't have saw the sun dim before the planet."
Also, remember, I was 14. My knowledge of astronomical phenomena was not that strong.
Yeah.
So I really wouldn't have known either way. I mean, I do, like I said, as an adult, maybe I would have thought differently, but at that time I didn't have that knowledge, so I really wouldn't have impacted on me. I just figured distance, I knew it took Starlight a little while to travel here. I didn't know specifics.
Yeah.
So at the time, it didn't affect me. But looking at it now, whatever. Boy. Another thing about being an adult and being a Star Trek fan is kind of a drag, isn't it? You watch and you find out all these things, and it's kind of a grim note to think about, isn't it? Not for me, though. I still love it. But anyway, I mean, I guess I'm almost seeing now why people stop becoming Star Trek fans, because they feel it's a childish thing. The suspension of disbelief is gone or whatever. But anyway, so the planet blows up, the Enterprise blows up. So I'm thinking, is this the end of everybody here? Then you see Picard kind of spinning around, and he's in this place with all these Christmassy things happening, and a wife and a family. And, I'm kind of assuming he's in that Nexus thing. And one of the kids is playing with a little toy, and you told me you knew what that toy was. I think we discussed this in the past, too. Yeah,
it was a toy model of a spaceship that was in a collection by Kenner for the Aliens.
Right, it was from the Alien movie.
Yeah. I had that. I have that toy, And it has, when I saw it, I recognized it right off, but I don't think anybody else in the theater knew that because
Like an Easter egg they put into it.
It wasn't a very popular toy line, but I mean, a lot of people bought the figures that went with it, you know, the alien creatures and stuff like that. And if you go on eBay, you can find it. You know, that little, they had like a tank, and it had that carrier was you're supposed to land it on top of an alien. It gets trapped inside of the little prison inside of the back that it carries, and it's like a hover thing, you know. But yeah, anyway, he was playing with that toy, and I was kind of laughing. It's like, oh geez, I wonder how many people here know where that toy came from. Where they just put that right in the movie. So, you know, I like, oh, there's a connection to the Alien films here somewhere in this movie.
So, probably just an Easter egg they put in. And see, that's something you noticed I wouldn't have recognized. I just thought it was like a little space toy they painted up. And an alien thing.
I don't know. I just thought it was funny.
So anyway, yeah. I mean, I remember playing with a spaceship toy, but I wouldn't have known what it was from.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen an alien yet at that point either. So, anyway, where I was at that point, we'll get into that at the end of this. But anyway, I was at another place at this point. But so Picard is getting presumably what he ever wanted. But apparently, he sees the exploding Amargosa star, or the impression of it, in a bauble on the tree, and he remembers, what is really gone on, and he's able to break his connection to the Nexus and realizes it's fantasy, or this is not real. And he meets up with Guinan, who explains to him that this place has no meaning in time and whatever, and he wants to get out. And she meets him up with a guy who, from his point of view, just got there, but that's how he and Kirk actually meet. Which is its own thing. I think you've mentioned an oddity about that too.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Picard and the Nexus.
Yeah, I mean, for one thing, when we first see Guinan on there, it's like, how was she there? Because obviously she'd have been on the Enterprise when it got destroyed. So we know that Picard was taken away by the Nexus, and we know that Dr. Soren was taken away by the Nexus. But somehow Guinan was there, and then we find out that she's just an echo of herself that was left behind from a time when she was there, and so which was kind of weird because I guess everyone that goes into the Nexus leaves a part of themselves behind if they leave it. Which
right,
means
so that means that wherever that is, Picard and Kirk also have a part of themselves in there too.
Yeah, so even though Picard and Kirk eventually leave it, there's still an echo of themselves in there hanging around. So, but anyway, when Picard meets Kirk in the log cabin, he's trying to explain to him where they're really at, and it seems like he doesn't want to hear it. And he's like kind of into the moment of what he's doing. He's back on Earth, and he's and he kind of thinks, oh, I had this cabin, I sold it, but and you could see the memories are trying to come into mind, but he's trying to just go along with it, trying to adapt to the the nuances of things. And Picard's really trying to hammer home the fact that we can't stay here. There's life at stake. We got to go back and stop this. And Kirk's like, I've done my bit for king and country, and if the galaxy thinks I'm dead, then who am I to challenge history? Basically. So he's pulling like a Luke Skywalker thing here from the Star Wars movie that was out there, the last one.
By The Last Jedi, where he's kind of cynical and doesn't care anymore.
Yeah, he doesn't care anymore. He's cynical and everything, and he's like, the hell with him. I've done everything I can, so I'm gonna enjoy my time now and retire, which was totally against the Kirk that we know, because we saw how he was just in the previous movies. I mean, look, he couldn't stay away from the Enterprise when he knew that V'Ger was coming. And he just kicks his friend aside and takes over the ship and everything. Well, and here we see him on Generations, and he's kind of like, I'm resigned to just, letting the things happen. Like he can't do anything. He doesn't want to do anything.
Now that I think about it, I can make this point a little later because it is important to this movie. But I looked at it at the time, and I did recognize what you just said, but I look at it like this, in a psychological sense that, Star Trek is about the human condition, aside from all the spaceships and the discontinuities or whatever. But I always wondered if that actually meant that there were certain things that Kirk felt he wanted because he pursued life in Starfleet, he didn't have them. So every time he was trying to pursue a command of a starship, it was trying to run further and further away from a life that he had never pursued. And now that he actually had it, he didn't give a care about Starfleet or Star Trek. Because Guinan had said you don't care about coming back when you're in the Nexus. Your greatest desires and secret desires are satisfied.
Hmm.
And, we have to wonder if Kirk's interest in Star was really a compensation for something else. Did he run from Carol Marcus? Did he ran from that Antonia, who was a woman that he had met in the movie? Did he run from the idea of a family? Did he run away from this or that?
Ran from his son,
Yeah, you got to get the impression that, and that's why I'm wondering, I know he wasn't alive, but did he encounter David there? In his fantasy? I mean, did he have the ready-made family he wanted there? I mean, I don't know what happened before that, because Nexus is not a linear place, but
I don't know. I always thought that, he had this, belief, which was kind of like with Jeffrey Hunter when he was playing the captain
right in the cage.
And he was like, I'm tired of being responsible for 203 lives, and he wants to go back to Earth and ride a horse and have picnics every day.
And the
maybe it's like a dream or something. When they're feeling tired or something like that, they always think, oh, this isn't what my destiny is, and I'm just supposed to, go back to the basics and just live my life each day that way or something like that. But maybe in the back of their mind, they know that's not the case, that they're really happier when they're out there.
And
I think
right. And you notice with Picard, there's a difference. Picard has what he wanted because, obviously there's that issue with his family dying just recently. And, so that part of him is satisfied. But a large part of him is still interested in being a commander.
Well, he's an explorer, and that's what he wants to do. He's got this thing for archaeology, and
right. So at that point, he's still fundamentally an explorer. So that's what takes precedence.
Yeah.
And he's in love with that. So that other need didn't need to be fulfilled. He was able to overcome that. With Kirk, he was a guy who was past his prime. He was getting ready to be shipped out, like he said. And when he got into the Nexus, it fulfilled his time to living ideas.
Yeah.
So maybe he came at it from an older retiree point of view, where Picard was still in his prime. He said, I was like you once.
Yeah.
He looked at Kirk and said, I was devoted to duty, but, now the galaxy owes me one. His idea was that he had just, he was kind of older and just kind of at a different point in his life.
Yeah.
Whereas in the motion picture, he was still, where Picard was in Generation, still gunning for a command.
Yeah. But, I just figure, because all his career, you see him, where people were in need and he was there to help. For whatever situation there was. And here we have a situation where a captain from another ship named Enterprise comes to him and says, I need your help, to stop this one guy. And he's giving him this song and dance about how, he's done everything he's done, for his career. And it just seemed like a snide, get the hell out of my face kind of attitude, and cynical. And
you also got to look at it this way, like whatever happened on the Enterprise B, that's 30 years after the motion picture and everything like that.
Yeah.
So Kirk's, he's a retiree. He's not in the same point of view as he was when he was a middle-aged guy who was going through a crisis and trying to get back on the Enterprise.
Yeah.
And he was an older guy who had settled into his life and just realized his time had come. Even in Star Trek 6, he was kind of at the end of his rope. So he was just at a different point of view. Picard was, still active as an explorer. So their priorities were different, but inevitably, Kirk realized the fantasy, and it's like, yeah, this isn't real. Nothing here matters. Yeah. I can just, there's no point to this. So let me go out and save the galaxy.
What happened is he was trying to jump over a creek, and he wasn't scared because he knew the creek wasn't real, and there was no consequence if he should fail. There was
no thrill of mortality.
That's right. So and that's what he always liked, is he liked to have that challenge, that that adrenaline rush, when he's in command of the Enterprise.
Which leads me to another scene. Guinan says you can leave the Nexus and go to any point in any time, which opens up the plot holes of all plot holes. How does one actually leave this thing? They just ride their horses into this big wormhole thing, and boom, they're gone.
They just decide to leave it, and they just ride off into the sunset, and that's it.
So basically, this whole universe is an existentialist nightmare. Everything is everything becomes totally philosophical. Totally. There was a movie that came out shortly thereafter that, which was very much the same concept, only much sadder, with Robin Williams, called What Dreams May Come. You ever seen it?
Yeah.
it takes the afterlife and turns it into an existentialist concept, very much like this Nexus.
Yeah.
Where you're not, where you're not dying to go to some paradise or whatever, where you're going to meet up physically with a loved one.
Yeah.
And this is something I've always wanted to talk about. Have you ever noticed how people notice Star Trek derived plot lines only when they appear in other movies?
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I've seen that.
Yeah.
They say, "Oh my God, that movie's so unique and original." It was in Star Trek 20 years ago. But it's like, people have to receive it in different ways, I guess, But yeah. I just noticed that when Dreams May Come thing was part of this Nexus thing. So it's all an existentialist concept, and there was really, it was a philosophical idea more than it was really a thing. So they leap out, and they're on this planet again. And of course, Kirk goes right back into his TOS fighting mode.
Yeah.
Which again shows you how terrible a fighter Picard is. And that's basically what that whole next scene is. Kirk is sitting there basically doing his Shatner fighting mechanic, which we've talked about many times, even though he's older. And Picard is sitting there getting his ass kicked.
Yeah, they gave him the job of trying to reprogram that rocket so it would not...
Right, he's trying to get up there, but Soren is trying to beat him out, and he's a human punching bag. Picard is half dying during the scene. So, okay, so you know what the funny thing is about this? At this point, I have this idea in my mind, oh, goody, maybe the Enterprise D wasn't destroyed. Maybe they prevented that somehow.
Yeah, but no, they come back at the time when the saucer was still coming down.
Like I said, and then they intersperse the saucer coming down. I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Because I really wanted my D, I wanted to keep my D there, I wanted to see more of my little Space Ritz-Carlton, as I call it.
So if Picard had known about what was going on, he probably would have came back earlier.
Yeah, but he didn't see the Enterprise D.
Yeah, I know. So he didn't know. He didn't know what was going on in space.
At that point, I'm thinking, they really want to get rid of this ship, don't they?
Yeah.
So anyway, this time he prevents Soren from doing this, but Kirk flies off a cliff on this bridge and just basically gets mortally wounded, which is not the way I would think Kirk would want to go out. But he goes out that way. Picard buries him on a cliff. There's that huge circular motion scene that they do.
Which really angered a lot of fans. I mean, because I could hear them in the audience kind of going, scoffing over it and like, oh, come on. They bury him under a pile of rocks on a planet they don't even know.
Yeah, you would have thought they would have put him in one of those sunglass container torpedo things like Kirk Spock and given him this Royal Starfleet reception. Yeah,
but instead that's how...
Kirk just throws him under a rock. Kirk just throws him under a rock and puts a stone on it or something, a tarn.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it is given this very... kind of Egyptian kind of passing, like he's mummified under there or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, here lies James T. Kirk on Viridian 3 in an alternate timeline.
Yeah. And really, they couldn't even leave the carcass there because, they're on a planet where they're not supposed to interfere with the social development of the society. So that means they had to take the saucer out of there piece by piece. They had to take the body of Kirk out of there. They couldn't leave any trace behind that there was, anything from another world on this planet because they were so technologically behind the rest of the the Federation.
Wasn't Viridian 3 one of the unpopulated planets?
No, there was a few million people on the planet. Data had when you're in that.
Oh, I thought there was another planet that had pre-industrial civilization.
No, that's the one they ended up on. Was the one, the pre-industrial civilization. That's the one they ended up on.
Okay, I never figured that. I thought they said it was one of the uninhabited planets.
No, it was inhabited. Because that's the whole reason why they went there was to stop that planet from being destroyed.
Okay, that is totally not how I remembered it, but I'll have to go back and see myself. I remember it being one of the uninhabited ones, but like I said, why haven't I watched this movie more recently? I remember it being the uninhabited one, but anyway. So, but anyway, what happened is that they're talking about ships coming to pick up the Enterprise survivors. And they, you wrecked one Enterprise, why wreck this one? Jeez, But anyway, but I figured, okay. So they go down to this planet, and and they're looking around at everything. I'm assuming that everybody on the Enterprise survived. I mean, they didn't talk about. He said everybody on the ship got out, but there was no. The Enterprise couldn't be salvaged. So Data finds Spot, and there's a nice little emotional moment with him, and then Picard has that whole thing where he talks about and this is something I've wrote in my little book of quotations, that he talked about Soren telling him that time was like a fire that you burn in. And he said he thought of time as a companion that came along with you on your journey to help you remember things that wouldn't come back again. And Riker talked about wanting to live forever in a very joking way. So in the end, Picard beams off to some of the ships coming to take them back, which was a Nebula-class ship, I believe the Farragut, and a couple of Oberth-class, if I remember. Yeah. And because the Enterprise, sometimes we forget how many people were on that ship. I mean, there was well over 1,000 people.
Yeah.
So most of them probably went on the Nebula-class, and the Oberth probably took care of whoever else was there. So,
yeah.
So they said, well, this wouldn't be the last ship named Enterprise. So, okay, that's setting up sequel for me. But you know what's weird about it? And this is just setting up. I have this idea we're going to go back to Earth or whatever and get another Galaxy-class ship. Like there'd be the Enterprise D1 or something. Or D2. Like this would be the... I don't know. I just suspect they'd do a Star Trek 5 or something. Like they'd have
somebody at Paramount had already painted an E on the Galaxy class, the Enterprise D model. They took the D off and they put an E there because I guess they assumed that was going to be what would happen. They would get another Galaxy class.
I didn't know that because that makes sense. I thought we were going to Star Trek 4 it and just have another Galaxy class ship.
Yeah.
But they didn't go in that direction. But that's another story. So, okay. That's just my impressions of Generation. So it's peppering things in at this point. So what would you want to pepper into this general conversation?
Okay, well, the story overall for Generations, it felt when I was watching that movie like I was watching like a 2-part episode of the TV show itself, Next Generation. And apparently, that was its downside with a lot of critics because they felt like they were watching a movie that should have been on the TV instead. And I'm thinking, well, it's like, the argument was always that Star Trek does well on television, and that's true. It always does, because they allow time to flesh out the characters, which in Generations, they really did a lot of, as they fleshed out Picard more, they fleshed out Guinan a little bit, they fleshed out Data, in that movie. There was a lot of individual stories going on in that thing. There wasn't a whole lot of action per se, but there was a lot going on in between the action scenes that we did see. That was developing these characters even more, even though this was supposedly going to be, like the last, voyage of the Enterprise, because we didn't really know at the end of that movie what was going to happen, if the crew was going to come back all together, or
it could have just been the end.
It could have been, they could have just said the end, and that would have been it.
That was almost like a backdoor ending or a backdoor beginning. There was no clarity. It was like this was just. Because I didn't expect the Enterprise D to get destroyed in that movie. That was kind of like an unexpected thing.
I mean, apparently in All Good Things, that's how they wanted to end it in All Good Things, is where they sacrificed the Enterprise at the end, but they decided to keep that ending for the movie.
If you look at All Good Things, technically they did actually destroy 3 Enterprises.
Yeah.
But not really.
Yeah.
I mean, they kind of destroyed Enterprise in 3 different timelines.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the Enterprise did kind of get destroyed in that if you want to look at it a certain way.
Yeah, but they wanted to actually have that saucer separation scene where, they were going to actually show it landing for the, first time, but they decided to save that little nugget for the movie when it came out.
I'm glad they didn't do that in All Good Things and blow up the Enterprise for the sake of the...
Yeah.
All Good Things, I mean, now that I think about it, we should probably do a podcast on that, too. I mean, that's a worthy, because, like some of the finales or some of the beginnings, we should probably do podcasts on the first episodes of the series, and then and the epic endings of the newer series, because All Good Things really was kind of an epic ending, bringing everything together. So with Generations, the Next Generation had kind of come to a conclusion. We'll get into that another time. I really want to do All Good Things at some point, but anyway.
But with Generations, the movie, like I said, to me it felt like a TV episode, which to me it didn't bother me that it felt that way. But apparently, looking at the reviews and stuff like that, it got hit a lot because of it.
Another Star Trek movie get described that way, but we had a couple movies to go to get to that one.
Yeah. So, I was like, that was really puzzling because, it was so popular. But yet, I guess when people go to the movie, they expect to see something grander, something more epic or something like that. But it's like it all depends on the movie you're seeing. I mean, you can see epic and grand in other films. But, with Star Trek, it can't be like totally epic. It can't be totally, one way or the other. It's got to have a mix because you got all these different characters in the story. And
there's an issue with Star Trek that I wanted to mention, but it's not in Prime, so should I mention it because it goes right with what we're saying now?
Yeah.
We can see from something that happened this week that I don't think even younger people want Star Trek to be too epic on screen.
Yeah.
They're not doing a fourth JJ movie.
Yeah.
That's what that says to me. Maybe the episodic thing needs to be in a Star Trek movie. That was complained about the motion picture too. They complained it was too much like a long episode.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what works for Star Trek. Maybe it is a TV thing, and going into the movies, it needs to keep some of that thematic thing.
Yeah.
You can't, if you want big effects and big stuff, Star Wars.
It's like McDonald's, okay? You can't glamorize fast food. You know what I'm saying?
Well, like I said, otherwise we're going to the Arch Deluxe.
There's certain things that you can't really build up to be more than what it is.
Exactly.
Star Trek is what it is. I mean, you can't take it on a big screen and turn it into some grand epic Doom.
Here's a good example of that because it's like that time. Remember, McDonald's tried to rebrand itself as McDonald's Cafe. Yeah,
I know.
It just fell apart because that's all McDonald's is. It's the alternative to Cafe.
Yeah.
I mean, did Burger King's call themselves the Burger King Bistro?
What made McDonald's so popular was kids loved to go there.
Right,
it was fun. It had colors.
It was basically junk food for low attention spans.
Yeah, but that's it was exactly fun. The kids loved to be there. They had the little characters and they had the colors.
Right, and you'd go there as kids, and when you grew up and realized how bad stuff was for you, you'd go back there once in a while for nostalgic purposes, but that's what it was for.
Yeah.
It was for either kids or nostalgia. It wasn't there to be your consistent diet. Well, it was for some people, but that's what it was.
With Star Trek, it brought families together, the place. If the parents would bring their little kids in there and they'd have Happy Meals and stuff. But now it looks like you're in a library. It looks like you're in a friggin' library now when you go in there. And it's like, I don't like this. It feels too it's too educated feel. It's like, well, how can you glamorize this, to be more than what it is? It's not that kind of place. It never was.
And with Star Trek, I don't think it was really connected to children so much, but it was kind of a family thing. And I think that in order to put the next generation on the big screen, they needed to develop a whole new criterion for how it was to do that.
Yeah.
Build up dramatic tension, which I think Generations did do. It pulled up the drama and the human things of the story, and I never heard anybody complain that movie was as boring as Generation, as the motion picture was.
Mm.
Because that movie had you on the edge of your seat most of it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like people shooting each other on the edge of your seat. It was wondering what was going to happen to this character. What was going to happen to the ship. It was more consequential, It was a more consequential story. There's a term that goes around that's kind of a non-word, really. I'm not sure you've heard it. This may sound condescending to some people, but Generations, again, like the motion picture, except it had action and it had more action, but the action in Generations was more of an adulting kind of action. You know what I mean? It was like, I don't know. It seemed, when I watched it, here's my impression. I felt like it was a little more grown up. I don't know how to describe it. But of course I was a teenager, so that was my impression. But yeah, I could see, and I got to tell you, I love this movie, and just to be honest, I could never understand why people put it down so much later.
Yeah.
Until I looked at what happened to Star Trek fans, and I looked at what happened to a lot of Star Trek later. But I'm going to say
you could see what was becoming happening with Star Trek just by the quality of the TV shows that were playing at the time. Right around that time when that movie came out, Generations. I think wasn't Voyager destined to come out there pretty soon after that?
They just announced it. They just announced because they had that first woman who was going to play Janeway, and
that's right. It was right around that time.
Voyager was supposed to premiere right around Generations, but they had to wait 6 months to recast the Janeway. But the thing is that wasn't there a show around that time called Space Above and Beyond that was kind of about a war?
Yes.
And they had Babylon 5. And Deep Space Nine to a degree, although Deep Space Nine still maintained a little of that Star Trek humanitarianism, but they were starting to kind of venture into a more all-flash kind of look.
Yeah, they were in that transition between the season 3 and season 4, because that's when Worf shows up on Deep Space Nine. It was right after the loss of the Enterprise D, and Worf decides he's going to help out. So. Yeah. So you had this period where everything was starting to go dark. with Star Trek, because that basically with Deep Space Nine season 4, you start with the Klingon wargs,
right,
picking up in the Dominion and all that
if
crap.
you look at it a certain way, Generations could be considered like the peak of classic Star Trek, and then it all
went downhill after that. Yeah.
And I actually, here's a weird thing. I actually call the period 95 after the decline. I just call it the decline because it was a slow downhill after that.
Yeah.
The brightness started to disappear. Now remember,
Voyager to some degree started off like that in the first 2 or 3 seasons.
Yeah, they kind of put a little of the light back into it.
Yeah. Eventually they did when they introduced 7 of 9. Then they started to bring more
humanitarian,
more of the original feel to it, like the TOS series.
rather than the survival Kazon stuff they were doing, and having the ship be trapped in the galaxy for 1 week and all of a sudden be blend of resources.
yeah, it was always
really weird, but that Voyager is another whole thing. But this was a really interesting place. We had the Next Generation in '94 just going off the air. We had Deep Space Nine just getting its legs in season 3, and I'll admit to you, season 3 was where I felt like with TNG is where DS9 started to really get interesting point.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I think Deep Space Nine in season 3 may have actually hit its peak in a way.
Yeah.
Because it itself started to go into a messed up place after that. But I think from 1 to 3, it sort of was an uphill thing. And then Voyager was coming out, so it was all this like Star Trek stuff overlapping.
Yeah.
And another thing I wanted to add, this is a little tidbit into the Generations thing, and they kind of tied it into Deep Space Nine too. And you started to see at this particular point. There was a show on PBS called The Scientific America. I don't know if you remember them.
I don't remember that.
They started to get books, and they started to do something about the physics of Star Trek, and I alluded to this with you earlier, where they were trying to explain how warp drive could not possibly work, how, the transporters could not work. And here's my thing. At 14, I was thinking of that like that little bratty kid who goes to a magic show and shows you how the magician does all his tricks. And I was like, shut up. It's like, this is the future. Who wants to listen to that guy with that huge mustache in 1899?
They said they couldn't do it. They couldn't make the hoverboard. And here there's a guy who just created the friggin'
It's like
hoverboard.
that guy in the 1890s saying that, I declare we can never break the sound barrier.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, in 50 years, this is all going to be, we're going to laugh at these people.
You're going to eat your words.
and so I'm like, I used to hate those shows.
The last thing you tell any human is you can't do it, because what happens is they get their back up and they get arrogant and they're going to do it regardless.
I had this fantasy about a Star Trek episode in Voyager on Deep Space Nine where they have some arrogant alien come on the ship and saying, "Oh, you can't do this with your ship. That's for demerits."
Yeah.
Like judging them on it and having them say, well, yes, we can do it. No, you can't. That's demerits for violating the laws of the universe. Like somebody coming in and kind of judging them, not in a Q kind of way, but like, well, we think we're so hot, and we've got it all going on, and you guys are violating the laws of the universe, that sort of thing. Because that's what was happening at the time. So even with the darkness, they were starting to eat away the principles of Star Trek. And they criticized the Enterprise D to death. They said, oh, this ship is more for civilians. It could never possibly run with an engine that small for a ship that size. And I'm thinking, guys. And these were all guys, by the way. This is not no women in this. Show at all. This was not a woman's show. Maybe a female scientist might have a different viewpoint. They should have interviewed Mae Jemison.
Mm.
She might have had a very different viewpoint, because she always talks about Star Trek in a very opposite way.
Yeah.
If you know about her, she was actually in Next Generation, but she talks about it as a wonderful future fiction. But these guys are sitting, and they're MIT. I used to call them glasses because they all had these glasses.
Yeah.
And they were getting up there basically saying that, the Starship would have to have like a little passenger thing and a big engine. And I'm thinking, you're looking at it from Albert Einstein's point of view, okay? Star Trek, Albert Einstein is like Isaac Newton. They've got Zefram Cochrane. Cochrane rewrote the concept of physics. But that's going to get into the next movie for another time, okay? Where's Zefram Cochrane is. I'm not going to get too much into him now because I'm just going to put that out there. So basically, 94 is like, I started to feel this Star Trek was coming under siege. The scientific community, unlike in Gene Roddenberry's time, where they used to use technology from Star Trek to base things on, were rejecting Star Trek like an organ transplant. And I'm finding that you don't remember any of this.
Well, I do remember there was, wasn't that right around the time when you had all these people that were denying how old dinosaur bones really were, that they're only like a few thousand years old?
Well,
And,
it's interesting to mention about that. If you look back at history, they say every 60s decade, whether it be 1860s, 1760s, 1960s, is a time of mass rebellion. And then every 90s decade, whether it be 1790s, 1890s, or 1990s, is a decade of cynicism and skepticism. And, the 1890s was full of it. I don't know if you ever heard the story of Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. It's like, oh, there's no Santa Claus, your parents bring. There's a lot of cynicism in the 1890s, And in the 1990s, again, you had this kind of cynicism thing about science. So I think that all kind of went into it, that people stopped thinking of Star Trek as creating the future as something that was getting the present all wrong. Living very much in the now and not thinking of the future too much.
Yeah.
And, so I started to see that as being more of a problem. And sure enough, if you look on YouTube now, that's kind of where Star Trek is today in a lot of ways. People kind of still in that point of view. So when Generations came out, to me, I started to see it kind of being wrecked from underneath. Like, I used to have this idea that when they have an Enterprise E, I feel they're going to have one by then, it's going to have this little tiny crew area and this huge engine. Because now everybody's like, well, you got to make it specific to our understanding of physics. Well, this is going by Cochrane rules. It's a totally different thing. I never saw Star Trek as applying to our rules in our time. I don't see why it should. It was trying to be science fiction that had some bearing in science, but it wasn't a slave to our science.
That's right.
No, by Einstein physics, warp speed could not be achieved. But by the physics of the 1890s, neither could the speed of sound. Like you said, human beings hear that and they think, well, we got to change the rules. Look at Kirk.
Yeah.
That was his whole MO. He changed the rules all the time. And in Generations, he changed the whole rules of time, essentially, by magically leaping out of that nexus and changing the 24th century.
Yeah.
So Kirk was just, forget the laws of physics. They're totally inconvenient, like you said.
Yeah.
That's why Q didn't bother with Kirk, because Kirk, he probably found interesting.
And really, what's the point in arguing, with people that are writing science fiction and saying, oh, this isn't possible? It's science fiction.
Exactly.
Fiction. It's science fiction.
This is an extrapolation of science. This isn't exact science,
Yeah. We're not allowed to write or imagine anymore in our, when we write stories about the future.
If you look at Star Trek, even though it's science fiction, the connection to real science is way, way more solid than you'll find in most sci-fi.
Yeah.
I mean,
but we get our inspiration from science fiction. I mean, half the gadgets we got today were, created by something we've seen in Star Trek.
Exactly. Add anybody?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So it's like, why sit there and spit all over it when you know damn well that the cell phone you're carrying on that flips open like the Star Trek communicator, who do you think got the idea to make that?
And that's what I was talking to you about.
Yeah.
That was back in the day we had those big fat flip phones, which are now antique.
Yeah.
But the guy was like, this is the Star Trek communicator, isn't it? So basically they're saying, well, Star Trek inspired our future, but it won't inspire the future from now on.
And how would they know? I mean, the generation in the 60s probably thought that none of that stuff would ever come to pass, and they'd never see it in their lifetime. And so, my father lived long enough to see a lot of that stuff he thought would be impossible come, so they don't know. These people don't know,
like I said, it's the most cynical thing to say in the on Earth is, oh, time's not going to change much. It always does.
Yeah.
And we at least expect. So there was that thing, which moves me into the more personal connection I had with Generations, okay? And I've been wondering if I wanted to mention this or not. But, one of the themes of the movie, if you look at it, was characters dealing with loss. Picard is dealing with loss of his relatives in a tragic situation. Soren is dealing with his entire species pretty much being wiped out and having survivor guilt. And apparently, I always have this guess that his nexus was that all his species had survived.
Yeah.
I just get, because he really wanted to go back, like he was addicted to it. Like, he really needed this to be.
Yeah.
Where Guinan, I don't know if her fantasy was the same, but whatever it was, she managed to learn to live with a reality. Kirk lost his connection to his time. You know, he realized his losses through the Nexus. And that's another thing I wanted to mention about the Nexus. He realized his losses through the Nexus. He was looking at it first like, I'm getting all I wanted. But then he looks at it and realized, yeah, I lost all this stuff and it's not real.
Mm.
You know, it's filling a fantasy, but it wasn't real.
Yeah.
But I've got a real purpose in the future. So he could have gone back to the 23rd century and said, hey guys, I'm not dead.
Yeah.
But no, he went back with Picard because he knew that his time there was over.
Yeah.
I mean, if he'd gone back and not been dead, it would have changed the entire timeline.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have died. Because, you know, it's funny that, you know, because they had mentioned the Enterprise B as being a mission where James T. Kirk was killed.
Mm-hmm.
So if he'd gone back and lived, the movie may never have happened.
Yeah.
Which would have been interesting, but that would have changed a lot of Star Trek history right there.
Yeah.
You know. But anyway, I didn't go that route because we've had enough alternate timelines in Star Trek now, haven't we?
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I say that with a big, big wink. But anyway, so yeah, so it's about loss. Now, just taking my personal situation, 1994. At that particular point, 94 and 95, in a very abrupt way, I lost pretty much every friend I ever had in very bad ways. So, you know, in an interesting kind of way, Generations was pretty therapeutic for me. Because, you know, one of the things about Star Trek that always functions really well, or movies in general, is seeing a mirror of your own experiences. Which is why I often mention, you know, when you see a lot of dark Netflix stuff that's kind of bleak and hopeless, you wonder, is the temper of the world just completely hopeless now? Because, you know, I always wondered if a person had suffered a loss of a relative at the time they watched Generations, or that they had been in a war or something, or whatever, if Generations actually had the same therapeutic effect on them as it did me. You know, and that's always been one of the wonderful functions of Star Trek, is that it takes you into this other world where there's adventure and there's space travel and there's characters, but also helps you understand through it something about yourself that you're not really dealing with.
Yeah.
And that's one thing Generations really did well for me, and that's one of the things I don't see enough in Star Trek after that. It doesn't bring human things, as Gene Roddenberry intended, into the fore. You know, you don't deal with racism. You don't deal with the loss of life. You don't deal with birth. You don't deal with different society issues in the space format. It just became totally space stuff after a certain point. And when you mentioned Seven of Nine coming into Voyager, that's when Star Trek started to get back through that character, incidentally, into the human issues.
Yeah.
And, you know, also, you know, Data, of course, I think everybody knows he's my favorite TNG character. You know, seeing Data go through emotional changes when he gets his emotion chip. Could not a teenager perhaps interpret that as a metaphor for puberty? I mean, think about it. Could not have those first years of TNG been kind of Data's childhood in a way? And when he gets emotions, all of a sudden he's going through an android puberty.
Yeah.
Where his emotions are hard to understand and he can't really put them together that well.
Yeah.
Now, to be honest, and, you know, I later learned that, you know, in life that I had a disability that affected my emotions somewhat. But at 14, perhaps I was perceiving them and having some of those same emotions. So when I saw Generations, it affected me in a lot of deep personal areas when I saw that. So some of the idiosyncrasies you mentioned, maybe my self-focus of it was taking away from some of these little side things that just I didn't notice because the story got me into it. Yeah. Which brings me to my conclusion. What makes Generations so wonderful to me is that it draws you into the story of the characters in the best sense of what Star Trek does. It gives you some of your human action, it gives you some of your spaceships, it gives you some of your new stuff, but it has a story that draws you in. It isn't just space stuff. It has a story that draws you in.
Yeah.
And I mean, and here's the weird thing. I heard a couple people, I don't even remember their names, who describe Generations as overly sentimental. Which is odd to me, because how could a story that deals so much with loss and destruction be sentimental?
Well, I think probably what they mean more is it was just too emotional. They didn't like the you know, well, how it was sad. But, you know, what's wrong with that? I mean, you're talking about...
But again, the term is more maudlin for that.
Yeah.
Sentimental is more like a Disney film, you know? Maudlin is more excessively emotional. Maybe Generations was maudlin, but I wouldn't say it was sentimental, you know?
No, it wasn't that way. I mean, it dealt with a lot of emotion, especially from Picard. who lost his family.
But yeah, maudlin, you could say that. I mean, I wouldn't use that word because maudlin's often used a lot of condescension too, but it's more appropriate. But sentimental, I mean, when Picard says time is like a friend that goes with me on a journey to remember the things that have happened because they'll never come again, that's not sentimental.
No.
That's acknowledging endings.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like Star Trek 6, all things end. There's starting to be an ending theme here. So I see it as like we've ended the TNG world. They put an end to that. The Enterprise D is gone. And they're going on to something I'm going to discuss at another time. So, yeah. So, but to me, it was like I was going through a transition. Star Trek was going through a transition. And to be honest, in an odd way, I left that theater completely satisfied. There was, it's interesting. If I'd been an adult who wasn't going through my own situations, I might have been concentrating more on the little things I could have nitpicked out. But it's interesting to go back in retrospect and see these things that don't make sense. But really, I left the theater more engrossed in the story and talking a lot about it. And it actually started my own personal interest in writing Trek fan fiction after that. So Generations was kind of a big deal for me. And I'm just going to throw this out there. I don't want to give, of the Next Generation movies that have come out, and there were, I think, 4 of them. There are 4 of them.
Yeah.
That is my favorite of them.
Yeah.
Is Generations. That is my favorite of them. I have another one I like, but I'll get into that, but not quite the same as Generations, because it had that TNG feel to it still. Yeah. It had the Enterprise D for most of it. It had that flavor of the characters and their interactions through most of it. Did Kirk need to be there or not? I don't know, but he was, and he's gone. That's it.
Yeah.
Sort of. We see Kirk again, just not Shatner's Kirk.
Yeah.
So, okay. So any more additions you've got to Generations here?
I just want to, make like a little bit of a comment about how, people with Luke Skywalker being the way he was in The Last Jedi.
Oh yeah, with like you comparing Kirk to Picard.
And being cynical and wanting to, put an end to the Jedi and stuff like that. Why was it they were, willing to accept, William Shatner's cynical portrayal of Kirk in that movie, but not seeing Luke Skywalker sort of at the end of his time, sort of like the way Kirk was in that movie, and the both of them kind of being cynical and all that when we encounter them after all these years. I don't understand. Was it maybe the audience? Well, I mean, we're talking how many years apart between the two movies? What, about 20? So I don't know. Maybe the audiences had changed, but it seemed like it was more accepted for a popular, character like Kirk to be that way. But when Luke Skywalker comes back after a long, long time, and he's like the way he is, it's like it really annoyed a lot of people.
Well, it could be because that movie came out when the time is shifting, and I've often said this. People said the 90s was like the 60s turned upside down.
Yeah.
Where instead of infectious gaiety and positivity, everybody was very cynical and very jaundiced and everything. And, if you look back in time and look at our lives, that attitude stuck around for a long time.
Yeah, it did.
Well into the 2010s. I mean, I'm just going to mention a political thing here just as a side note. Even during Obama's time, and yes, we can and all that, that cynicism just stuck and stuck and stuck. And now it's just starting to get unglued a little bit. Just a little bit. We're starting to see people like we care again. But that stretch from the early 90s up through the early 2010s, people just didn't often care.
Yeah.
It's like this really long period of longer than I've ever seen of a cynical time just taking over. And
so here we got Luke Skywalker basically reflecting back what we're doing to ourselves. Right.
And like I said, when I saw that was a very 1993, 94 thing.
Yeah.
Like, you have a jaundiced, cynical...
Nobody could stand it. Nobody could stand Skywalker being that way. And it's like, he just put a big mirror up in front of society and said, this is what we're doing right now.
The young folks who are out there protesting and are more active see that, maybe like, oh, that's our kind of nasty parents looking at it. But maybe those nasty parents are looking at it like, that's us at 15.
Yeah. Well,
that's us who didn't care.
Yeah, well, I'm 47. I saw it, and I could understand, to some degree why Skywalker was like that, but I'm not saying that,
But like I said, you may not have been that kind of person either.
That's right. I'm not a person that's cynical or I give up on all hope. I'm just saying that, time comes when you feel like that.
Yeah, I mean,
you need to reanalyze
this
things.
is a constant trope with me. When I saw Luke Skywalker acting like that, I was sort of being, very flippant about it, saying, "Oh, that is so 1993."
Yeah.
This seems like an old trope. Like that. If they thought Star Trek back in the '90s, they could have done that easy.
Yeah. Oh,
They
yeah.
were right in with that time.
Yeah.
But it just seemed like an old thing. Like, this is 2017. We've got Black Lives Matter. We've got protests. It's a different time.
Yeah.
There's a rebirth of hope and people trying to go out there and do things. And Luke like, I don't care. The Jedi was stupid. Let's burn it all up. Seems like how we got into this mess in the first place.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you get from cynicism? Nothing at all. And I do mean nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing happens, You do nothing, you get nothing. It's comfortable. But don't complain when bad things happen because you didn't do anything.
Yeah.
So, like I said, Luke can't come back in the future and say, oh, well, things got messed up in the Star Wars universe and, I could have done more. You didn't do more. You let things get to you, But like I said, that wasn't writing for 2017 or whatever. That wasn't writing for another time.
Yeah.
With Kirk, that seemed to fit in with the zeitgeist of that period.
Yeah.
And that's why you didn't notice it so much, because that was such a prevalent mainstream thing then.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at even the sitcoms of the early 90s, they go from wisecracking jokes to more nastiness.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're right. Cruel remark following a laugh track.
Yeah.
Going from a smart alecky kind of just, kind of like an old married couple thing into this thing where people are just cruel and that's funny.
Yeah.
And that was just, I see with Kirk, it's like he was just kind of going along with the times a little more. But like I said, it didn't register to me because I was concentrating on Picard. I figured, Kirk's an old man. He's over. He's not going to care anymore. But Picard is the guy. I was charged up on him the whole scene.
Yeah.
I mean, because he was the guy I was in there to see. I didn't care what Kirk was doing for anything, but that's me.
Yeah.
But I mean, with Kirk, I guess maybe if you grew up heavier on Kirk and he was, you remembered a little bit of TOS being the only thing out there. You know what I mean? You had some years of that.
Yeah.
Well, I only had a few years of it, so maybe you had a context for Kirk. I didn't.
Yeah. Well, you see, we had the 3 seasons rerun for a decade.
Right. And you had a little more of that.
It was established in our psyche what this man was. And, in the movies before Star Trek Generations, it kind of, reiterated that same thing about him. And then in Generations, you get this totally opposite feel of him, which, kind of threw me off a little bit. Like, this isn't a guy that would just drop a challenge. He loves a challenge, this guy,
You know the thing about Kirk, though? If you see him on the Enterprise B, I'm wondering if his Nexus persona was based on the fact on the Enterprise B, he kind of knew that he wasn't going to get command of that ship, and he kind of was more resentful. And he's like, well, I didn't get the command this time, so I don't care. I'm just going to do my own thing.
Yeah, but still, he took up the challenge of going down to the deflector control room to, realign the thing to create a resonance burst that would have simulated a photon torpedo detonation. I mean, he still didn't shy away from doing something that could have saved the crew. So even up to the end, which they thought, he died, even right to the end, he felt the need to be there, to be hands-on. And
also, one of the reasons why maybe I slipped past it is because when he realized that this Nexus was not real, I think he realized his own cynicism in a way. He's kind of like, I've become complacent and I don't care-ish. And Picard's reminding me I still have a purpose. As he said, I can still make a difference out there.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe he looked at the Nexus like, this is the end of my life.
Yeah.
Now I'm in, this is my Eden or whatever. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. This is my paradise. Maybe he thought that was actually death. I mean, he's a space explorer, but maybe in his mind he thought that he died and this was just his paradise and that this was not a real tangible thing. Picard came to him and said, hey, you aren't dead. You're in this tangible universe of your own creation, but there's a universe out there that actually needs you and go to it,
Yeah.
So maybe he just didn't care because, Guinan said, again, you didn't want to come out of that thing, Like I said, I guess that also says that if you get everything you ever want, you stop caring. And Kirk was one of those guys. Yeah. But maybe he needed a purpose. I mean, there are some people who would love to have a paradise where things were satisfied for them. But there are some people who need to challenge themselves and thrive off it. And obviously Kirk needed that. When he had everything he wanted, he was cynical and unsatisfied. But when he had a purpose, all of a sudden he had a purpose again, and he was Kirk, you know?
Then he had a direction. He knew what to do.
See, where Picard always had that sense of direction there.
Yeah.
So it was different. I just saw it that way, but that's, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did notice it, but I guess it didn't really stick out much to me because I knew the whole point with him getting past that.
It felt like it was sort of like an opportunity where Picard could have used more of his diplomatic skill with Kirk to try to bring him to the realization, you know, instead of having Kirk kind of ride off on a, you know, and find out the heart, you know, on his own that it wasn't real. I mean, it just seemed like, well, this is a scene where you could have had Picard showing his strengths to convince Kirk, you know, that look, you know, this is not where you belong. You know, you belong in the universe that you left, and we need you back. You gotta come back one more time and do what you do best, you know, and basically kind of bring him to the realization that way. Just as we found out when they come back to Viridian 3, that, you know, Picard's strength isn't fighting, where Kirk's strength is fighting, you know, stuff, because that's kind of how the two are separated. That's how the comparison ends, you know, because remember how they had that debate, who's better, Kirk or Spock, or Kirk or Picard?
They're better at different things.
Yeah, they're good at different things. They're two different people. You can't compare them. Just because they command a ship named Enterprise doesn't mean they're anything alike.
First of all, they're 75 years apart. They're not from the same era.
Yeah.
Even Janeway and Voyager made a joke that all of them, Kirk and all of them, would have booted out of service today.
Yeah.
I mean, and then you go back and further and look at would Archer and any of them have survived in the 23rd century?
Yeah.
You know, it's times change. And then who knows, if we go into the future in Star Trek, will Picard and them seem outdated?
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, would you want a guy in Iraq in the early 2000s who was involved in the Spanish-American War? I mean, with all the social differences you would have had then?
Yeah.
Now, that may be a moot point, but I'm just saying that.
Yeah.
In the future, where you move in such a faster way, different eras seem very different.
Yeah.
So I just look at, like I said, it was generations. It was Kirk from one time and Picard from another, and they had very different attitudes and very different strengths. And like you said, I think that kind of, because after that, I noticed they didn't compare them as much. You know, because around the Star Trek 6 of Generations, there was all this, is Kirk or Picard better?
Yeah.
And then after Generations, like, now it's clear, like you said, it's not a matter of better or worse, it's a matter of what their strengths are.
Yeah.
Kirk was, even they started to hint in Next Generation, was better at what they call cowboy diplomacy.
Yeah.
A little attempt at negotiation, but then getting into action.
Yeah.
Not necessarily just violence, but just kind of getting to the point. Like, do we do it or not? Do we do this or not? You know, that sort of thing. Where Picard would be a diplomat and go in there and say, well, there's other possibilities.
He'd bring people together to discuss it, you know.
Where Picard was more like either is or isn't. He was more either or guy.
Yeah, he's like, well, I know what's best for you, and this is where you're going to go, and you know,
it's
like that.
It's either got one choice or another.
Yeah, it's like that episode where where they had the computers fighting each other. Remember?
Yeah.
That's cowboy diplomacy. What Kirk did there in that whole episode there was.
Yeah, he's kind of like, well, I gave you your chance, either or. You didn't take it, so I'm going to take one of them away.
Yeah.
Picard would have sat there like that ambassador with the froggy outfit on, you know.
Yeah.
He would have sat in there and tried to negotiate. He would probably be better at it, of course, since he's the hero character. But Picard would have had them sitting at a desk and, you know, and working it out. That's Picard's talent.
Yeah.
And Riker might have done more of the Kirk stuff, but, you know, that was... Because Riker tended to be more the Kirk type of guy, even though he was a little more...
You like the action, basically.
He was more the guy who was like, do we do this or not? But Picard gives me the orders in the end of the day.
Yeah.
But I think Picard was at the center of it, where Kirk was like, I'm going to be the arbiter of it all, you know?
Yeah.
And in that situation, they needed that old school arbiter. You know? And I mean, there's a certain attitude where Picard's looking at Kirk and everything, and they're all fighting together, where you almost wonder if Picard's thinking in his head, oh, look, there's Captain Kirk kicking it old school, you know? It's like, we don't do it that way in this time, you know? But he's like, we need that thing right now, you know? So I kind of thought of that. But, okay, so aside from those points, is there anything else about Generations you wanted to kind of touch on? Or?
No, I mean, it was one of my favorite Next Generation movies that they did. Actually, it's the only one, really. I mean, I didn't really care for the other three they did after that. So
Me, I have a couple ideas of what I want to do for mine next week, but I'm not going to be sure. But at some point, either next week or the week after, we're going to be discussing the next movie, which is something, shall I say, I have to emotionally prepare to deal with that. Because, as they say in Quantum Leap, they're talking about how they travel through time. If you see time as a string and you connect everything and your life is touching, the next Star Trek movie after that, and it just occurred to me, that represents the time when you and I first encountered each other. So that's where that's going to get interesting, because we're talking about something we experienced together new.
Yeah.
And, I don't know if we discussed it a lot then. I mean, my memory of that time is fragmentary on that. But I'm wondering something that's going to come out, some of those discussions we had at the time when we do that. But, that's where things intersect, where our, like they say in Quantum Leap, where the events in our lives kind of came together on that string.
Yeah.
We're kind of leaping around in each other's lifetime,
Yeah.
So that was what, that movie is where we both have a connected memory of it. So,
yeah.
I'm not sure we're going to do that next week or the week after, because that I'm going to have to figure out how to work that in. But anyway, that's Generations. Big hi to Stuart from over at Trek Yards. And I wanted to remind you, I know I haven't been putting links to your videos in every one, but some of them don't apply, so it's nothing personal. I may or may not put one in this one, but I know you're out there. Thank you for all your continued support and having me share it on your Facebook page. And I haven't done this as well as I should have been doing, but subscribers, please subscribe to our channel. Our viewership is still irking me a little bit, but watch the videos, comment, but try to keep it clean. I know on YouTube it gets to be messed up sometimes, but try to keep it clean in there. And bring your friends in, keep the trolls out. And if you want to get on notifications, click on the little bell too. They make you do that on YouTube now. So I got to get a little stronger with that, because I want to get people interested. So anyway, that's Generations. And until next week, live long and prosper.